Hello there, friends and RC family. My name is Alec from High Noon Hobbies, and this time on the channel we are going to be talking about how to get into flying FPV drones in 2023. Many of you may not have realized that I picked up a few additional hobbies during my trip and fall down the rabbit hole that is RC crawling over the last year and a half. One of these additional hobbies that I've picked up along the way is FPV drones. I actually got into it because a buddy of mine, Jace, 816 Garage, you guys have seen him on the channel before, also flew or flies drones, and I saw him flying one out at an event, and I knew from the moment that I saw him fly one, get in the goggles, I saw it took off, I saw the drone flying around. He was in a 5-inch freestyle quad, so he was flying around super fast, 6S battery, doing all sorts of crazy tricks. I knew that I needed to get into it myself. Maybe the same thing has happened to you. You've seen one of your friends pick up their drone at the local park or an RC event and fly it around, and it impressed you, and now you're here and you're wanting to get into it yourself. Maybe you've seen a few of the clips on my channel and you looked like something that you would be interested in getting into, and you're into RC already, so it's just kind of a logical flow, a logical progression. Or maybe you've seen videos online of people doing all sorts of crazy stuff in FPV drones and you want to get yourself one and get into flying in the real world. Well, hopefully today I can help you do that. I can help you figure out how to get into the FPV hobby. That's my plan, at least, and I'm basically just going to talk to you here like we're friends, because we are, and just to share my experience of how I got into the FPV hobby and how I think you can do the same thing that I did. So let's just jump straight into it. But before we get into it, I want to remind you guys that if you want to see more content like this every single week, go ahead and subscribe to the High Noon Hobby YouTube channel. Towards the end of the video, if you do make it and you did find this video useful, go ahead and give it a like. And while we're doing all this stuff, go ahead and check out highnoonhobby.com/shop, and you can check out all of the 2023 High Noon Hobby merch. I'm currently working on getting this thing done, so I promise a ski ride video is coming soon. It's just, this is how much I currently have assembled, and I need to keep working on that. But I have to make this video before I can finish it, so here we are. I'm going to make this video, and then I'm going to finish this, and then we're going to get out in the snow, play with it, and then I'll have a video for you guys on the ski ride too, so that is coming. Besides that, North vs. South, starting March 5th, I'm going to be out there this weekend, right? Yep, because this is going to air on the 4th, I think, right? And this is going to air on the 3rd. Something like that. Anyways, this weekend, first Southern qualifying round. Don't worry if you missed out on this one. The first Northern qualifier round is coming up in just a couple of weeks. Go ahead and follow the North versus South, or Northern Select Crawlers versus Southern Crawlers Facebook page, and that's going to give you all the information that you need. Okay, that's everything that I have. Let's get into me describing my journey of getting into FPV. Like I said, I got into flying FPV drones because I watched a buddy of mine flying FPV drones, and it just looked way too cool. It looked like far too much fun for him to be hogging it all to himself. I needed to get in on the action. I needed to fly some FPV myself. I was convinced right out of the gate, but that didn't mean that I was going to dive headfirst into another relatively expensive hobby, as we all know that RC hobbies, any RC hobby, can be. So I decided to pragmatically approach the problem of wanting to get into FPV and test the waters to make sure that it was something that I was interested in doing myself, and I wasn't just jumping in and spending a ton of money on something just because I thought it looked cool to do from a distance. So the first thing that I did was purchase a controller. And the reason that I purchased a controller first is that it allowed me to hook it up to my computer and play on a simulator and just fly around in a simulator for a relatively low cost, and see if the controls and everything clicked. If if I had it in me to take the time and effort that it was going to take to learn how to fly an FPV drone. And I will tell you right now that learning how to fly an FPV drone, especially if you've never flown any sort of RC aircraft in your life like me when I got into drones, is not particularly easy. Now, that's not to say that it is necessarily as difficult as learning how to fly like an RC helicopter or something like that. There are certainly more difficult aircraft to learn how to fly than a quadcopter, but that doesn't mean that it is easy to learn from complete no knowledge of aviation whatsoever to figuring out how to fly a drone. But I went out, I got a controller. I decided to go for the Jumper T Pro, and I did it with an ELRS transmitter. It was a 1000 milliwatt transmitter, so I've got essentially a 1 watt transmitter built into this controller. Now, there's lots of different things to consider when you're purchasing FPV gear, and this is by no means a video to help you decide what FPV gear to purchase, because this video would be like 2 hours long. So I'm going to be telling you the things that I purchased, but that doesn't necessarily mean in any way that that's what you should purchase. And in fact, half of the purchases that I made like 8 months ago for FPV are already outdated, and there's new stuff out that's better. So that just shows you that it really doesn't matter so much. You just gotta make the decision in the moment that you're buying your FPV gear, because it's constantly changing, constantly evolving, and you just have to try to make the best decisions on what FPV gear you're buying based on the situation you're in and the time that you're looking to purchase things. And you can try your best to time with new releases and do all this and figure out what the latest and greatest and the best is going to be or is right now. And just so you know, it's gonna be outdated in like a year anyways. So just make good decisions based on what you think you'll enjoy using, and only upgrade if you really don't enjoy what you're using, or you think you would enjoy something that is more expensive, that much more, that it makes it worth it to you to do so. Okay, that's a side tangent, but I got a ELRS Jumper T Pro controller. That is the reason that I got that one, is because it's kind of video game-esque, or game controller-esque, so it's relatively small, easy to use, easy to store, easy to pack and take places. The ELRS I was sold on because it was a new radio transmission protocol that was coming out when I was getting into FPV, and it was really taking the market by swarm, and it basically it took all the good aspects from all of these different protocols and seemed to just put it into one protocol. It was open source, it was free or inexpensive hardware, and it was easy to use, and it had the same range of some much higher end protocols that you might expect to spend a lot more money on. So ELRS, still a great protocol, still would recommend you looking at getting an ELRS controller. But yeah, lots of different options for controllers. You can get a controller with an internal module, you can get a controller that you have to put an external module on it for different types of transmission protocols, and all that is a whole bunch of stuff that you can go into in a million other videos that you're watching to figure out what controller it is that you want to buy. But the general premise of this is I would recommend buying a controller first, potentially spending $20 or so on a simulator, and getting that controller hooked up to your laptop or your desktop computer and just playing around in the simulator. That's an easy way to spend $100 and $120 maybe. See if it is worth it for you to spend another $5, $6, $7, $8, $9, $1,000+ on this hobby, because you are going to be doing that if you decide to pursue the FPV hobby full force, wholeheartedly, if you will. All right. For the simulator, I purchased Velocidrone. It's relatively inexpensive. I can't remember exactly how much it is, but I'll put it on the screen right now. But Velocidrone has been great for me. The graphics aren't anything to knock your socks off. It's not like you're not in some crazy Call of Duty modern tech fair war drone simulator. It's not going to be the coolest graphics in the world, but gets the job done. It definitely makes it feel like you're flying, and yeah, you can get a sense for how to fly in this simulator. It feels very realistic. You can choose all sorts of different properties of your drone to try to make it more similar to the drone that you're actually going to be flying in real life, or the one that you would actually want to fly in real life. You got all sorts of different maps to play on and all sorts of different good stuff like that. And yeah, just generally Velocidrone has been great. I think it's been worth it. But there are free ones out there. I think Orca FPV, if I'm not mistaken, that's a free FPV flight sim that you can use and see for free whether or not FPV flight is something that you're interested in. I mean, granted, you still really, in my opinion, should get the controller, because without the controller, you really have no idea what the experience is actually going to be like. I mean, I'm sure you can figure out some sort of way to use your keyboard or your mouse to control the drone, and you can play the game as a game, but it doesn't really simulate what it's going to feel like to be flying that drone. And so getting a controller, I think, is probably a much better call to really try to figure out what that experience is going to feel like. Now, my recommendation here is to fly 20-ish hours in the flight simulator before you pull the trigger on even purchasing a drone. And that's just my opinion. I'm sure people have varied opinions on this, but that's, I feel like, a safe bet. If you've flown 20 hours in the flight sim, you're probably not great at flying yet, but at least you have a sense for how to do it. You've probably watched a couple YouTube videos to figure out, okay, what is it that I'm doing here? Maybe you've set up the controller a little bit, so now you've got some different modes that you're using and playing around with, and just generally, by 20 hours, you're starting to get a feel for it. And I think at that point, if you're still into it, you are probably good to actually purchase yourself the rest of the equipment that you're going to need. And one caveat I forgot to make for the purchasing of a flight simulator, or the flying in a flight simulator, is that it's really kind of a pain to try to use your goggles in a scenario with your computer to use a flight simulator in goggles. And realistically, the goggles are like, just if you want to get a similar feeling, just put your face really close to your computer screen, because that's essentially the same thing that the goggles feel like. So if you can fly a drone on your computer screen, you can essentially fly your drone in a pair of goggles. It's going to be a very similar feeling of flying on your computer screen with all of the lights turned off in your room, so all you see is the computer screen. That's essentially what goggles feel like anyways. It's just really close to your eyes. So you've made it through your first 20 hours of simulator flight. Now, I would still personally recommend closer to 35 or 40 hours of flight sim time before you jump into one of your actual drones. But at 20 hours, you can at least get it in the mail, starting to come to you while you continue to practice your flight every night. The next step is to purchase your goggles and your drone. A few caveats before we get into kind of the nitty-gritty here. This is the most nitty-gritty part of this video, so if you felt a little uncomfortable with how deep we're going so far, you just get ready. But I want to give you a few caveats here so you know whether or not you even really need to continue watching this video at all. So the first caveat is, if you only have like $300 to spend on your entire FPV kit, you might consider getting a kit like this that has all of the, the controller or the goggles and the little tiny whoop all in one package, or, something like this, something similar. They're all pretty much around that, $200 to $300 price point, and you can get everything all in one kit, and that will be a way to fly FPV. But know that if you've seen videos like this, or this, or this, and you expect to have that experience with this product that you've purchased, know that you are going to be sorely disappointed, and you are probably going to be surprised by the lack of performance. And that's just kind of, you are about $600 off of having a kit that is able to do this. So if that's what you want, just know that you can't do it with this kit. Now, that's not to say you can't have fun with this this beginner's kit, but just know that you may be disappointed if that's what you're looking to get into, and you might want to just save up your money and get to a point where you can buy like a 5-inch freestyle quad or a race quad or something like that, where you can have a little bit more of that extreme type of fun. Now, the second caveat I'm going to give is if you just absolutely hate the idea of spending hours, or at least a couple of hours, taking a look at what parts and pieces to this puzzle you want to purchase to create your own FPV flight kit, you might just consider going with an FPV flight kit. They've got their new Avatar or Avanta. It's like kind of an FPV drone that's kind of cool. Or they've got their like original DJI FPV kit that I think is like $1,000 or $900. And you can get that, and it's just got everything. It's got a really nice set of goggles in it. It's got a decent drone. It's got a nice controller, and the real annoying part is that probably most of your flight experiences or your experiences with the DJI products are going to look more like this or like this, but still, it's easy, right? You don't have to solder, you don't have to put anything together, you don't have to take anything apart. It all just works. You take it out of the box, it connects to, Bluetooth, talks to each other, easy peasy, no setup required. I'm sure it's still kind of a pain in some regards, and you're also totally digital, so you're going to be like flight restricted, and you're going to have to log in, and it's going to be a whole thing. Whereas if you just built your own, you wouldn't have to log in. There'd be no flight restrictions. You can do whatever you want with it because it's your aircraft and you're a responsible adult. Yeah, right. Okay, good. Had me scared there for a second. But anyways, DJI is an option, right? If you just don't want to deal with soldering or doing any of that, and it all sounds like hell, and even figuring out what controller works with what system and figuring out your radio protocols and all this stuff, just go with DJI. It's fine. It's all good. But you probably won't have the same experience as you would going into like a 5-inch freestyle quad or a race quad, or even like a baby hawk, a little 3-inch whoop guy that is designed to just have fun with, right? You're not going to have the same experience with the DJI quad that you're going to have with all of those, but at least you're not going to have to deal with any of the monotony of figuring all of this out. Okay, those are my caveats, right? If you don't fit into one of those two camps, then you're probably good to just watch the rest of this video and figure all this stuff out, and we can talk through it together. So the next step of how I got into FPV is obviously I bought the rest of my equipment. I bought goggles and I bought a drone. And now, when you're talking about goggles, the first question that you have to ask yourself is whether or not you want to have analog or digital feed for your goggles. And this essentially, if you don't understand anything about FPV, you can basically think of this as like your tube TV with the antennas on top of it versus like digital cable TV, plug it in, crystal clear HD quality, right? Like analog quality is over the air. It's like radio frequencies, and it's going to be kind of not the best. It's not going to be totally HD. You're probably going to have some like 480p type of deal going on. Maybe 620, I don't know what the next rate up is, but it's not going to be great, right? It's going to be sub HD, and it's going to be kind of garbly. Now, a lot of people like analog because it's very low latency, and because you get kind of a warning when you're going to disconnect. So as you get further away from yourself in the quad, and you're flying away from yourself, as you fly away from yourself with analog, it's going to get fuzzier and fuzzier and fuzzier and fuzzier, and then all of a sudden you're not going to be able to see, right? With digital, at least this is the idea, right? What the idea is that with digital, you're going to keep flying and keep flying away from you, keep flying away from you, keep flying away from you, not realize how far away you're getting and how poor the signal's getting because it's just reporting back a number, and maybe the latency's getting slightly worse and worse, but the picture quality still looks really good, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, boom, you just black screen and you have no video at all, and you have no control over your quad. Possible, very possible. But That being said, it's a very long range that you're going to be dealing with digital, so you probably won't do that. And also, if you understand just a few things and you're paying attention to what you're doing, you're not going to have a problem with that. It's just a matter of, what do you want? Do you want lower latency, usually lower price, lower latency, and lower weight? Go with analog, right? You're going to save yourself some money. You're going to be able to make a lighter quad, and you're going to have essentially the same functionality. It's just not going to look quite as pretty. Now, if you want something that looks prettier and is maybe just a little bit easier to set up and have it work and not have to deal with changing frequencies and signal interference and all that sort of stuff, maybe think digital. I personally went with the DJI FPV V2 goggles, not the FPV goggles 2, but the big ones, right? The kind of clunky looking ones. And I will say they are kind of clunky, they are kind of heavy, but I don't find them too uncomfortable. And on top of that, I also have a module that I can put on the front of them where I can make them analog. So I've got both digital through FPV or through DJI's digital FPV system, and I have analog because I can just slap that little digidapter on the front of it and I can have analog. And so actually my first quad, which we'll get to in a second, was analog, and then I switched to digital. I kind of worked my way up, and I was able to keep one goggle throughout that entire process. And I don't know too many goggles that you can do that same thing with. I think the HD Zeros or the new Fat Shark ones that also have that also do digital, and Fat Shark is working on their own digital system that's separate from DJI, which honestly, if I were going to do it again, I'd probably go that direction just because I'm not a huge fan of DJI, but that's kind of more of a personal preference thing than anything. I do like the way that my DJI system works. I think it works pretty decent. But if you're looking to kind of support the industry the way that I would want to support the industry, if I were to do it again, I would probably do Fat Shark. And it looks like you can get an analog adapter for those new digital Fat Sharks, which means you can do the same thing that I did, where you have both digital and analog, and then you can run any drone to your heart's content. But goggles, that's your first step, and the biggest concern there is digital or analog. And then once you make that decision, it really narrows down your choices, and you can start to make your decision at that point based off of budget, comfort, what you're looking for just in general, and you know, cool factor, all that sort of stuff. You can figure out all that and figure out what goggles you're after. Now that is going to your goggles, right? Now you know what type of video transmission system you want. Now you know what type of control transmission system you want, right? Because you already have a controller, and it may have an internal control system. If it doesn't, that's great. That means that, or if you have an additional module that you want to put on there, or you have an ability to put a module on there, then you can choose after the fact, after you've bought the controller, which is that's what I went with. I went with something that has an internal module, but it also has the ability to put a module on the outside in case I want a different protocol down the road for my actual controller. But I ended up going with ELRS on both the drones that I have, or I guess all three now. But the first two drones that I ended up with, and I basically took my principle that I learned from RC crawling and applied it to drones, which is, if you want to learn how to do it right, how things work and how to repair it when you break it, because you're going to break it, then it's best to just put it together yourself to begin with. And that's what I did. So I actually went ahead and I bought this kit here from Rotor Riot, and it's just a little 5-inch freestyle quad kit. I don't even know if they actually sell this kit anymore. I don't really think they do, and it was pretty inexpensive. The analog kit from them was like, I don't know, $300, less than $300. But I did see a kind of similar kit to this that it looked like a Joshua Bardwell named kit on getfpv.com. I'll put a link to that down below. Kind of similar to this, and in that similar price range of like under $300. And so that's what I ended up doing. I ended up putting this together myself. Definitely you're going to want some soldering experience. If you don't have any soldering experience at all, you might hate your decision to put together your own drone. You might consider getting a pre-made drone, which actually, since I purchased my drones, the market has shifted already. It's changed quite a bit, and now you can get actually really good prices on pre-built FPV drones, like the Nazgul 5V2. You could get something like that for like the price I think that I paid for this unassembled, and that comes with everything that you need. So I don't know. The market's definitely changing, shifting. Maybe you don't want to put it together, and maybe you just want to save yourself some time. It seems like the price is kind of a toss-up right now. Whether or not you're even saving yourself money by putting it together, I don't know, but at least you are giving yourself the knowledge to fix it down the road, because even if you buy a pre-built kit, I think it's safe to assume that eventually you are going to be soldering this. I picked up my other drone. I was like, wait, wasn't I just holding another drone? I hope that I was holding up the right one. This is the first one that I bought, right? Yeah, I'm pretty sure I held up that one. This is the second or third drone that I bought, but we'll talk about that in a second. The second drone that I got was a Emax Tiny Hawk 2, and I got that at the same time as the DIY kit from Rotor Riot, and I got that basically just as a easy, didn't need to assemble, nothing, just works, and also I could fly it inside. So I figured I was kind of buying it during the summertime where it was going to be hot and we were going to be spending time in the AC, and I figured what better way to learn how to fly a drone than just get a tiny one and fly it around the house all the time. And I did that a little bit, although if I were to make these purchasing decisions again, I don't know that I'd necessarily purchase the indoor drone, but I think I probably would. It's been a lot of fun. I've had a blast with it, and I've actually taken it on vacation and stuff like that, and it's great for like the cousins and stuff to or not the cousins, the nieces and the nephews to fly around. They get a kick out of it, or you know, put the goggles on them, have them fly around in it, and they always have a blast with that. And just generally it's fun, but it's not like crazy adventurous fun, and like a light breeze, and it could end up 100 yards away from you and in the ocean. So it's definitely not a super capable drone, but the Tiny Hawk is still really fun. So I wouldn't steer you away from it necessarily, but I wouldn't recommend it as like that's the only drone you're getting. You can do it, and you just might regret it. You might have to upgrade very quickly. Maybe you're not like me, though. Maybe that is satisfactory. Maybe all you're trying to do is go in your backyard. You have like a 20 foot by 20 foot backyard, and you're trying to fly around back there and like fly through the trees and stuff. Honestly, the Tiny Hawk would be a blast, and you could keep it running forever for like $8. So it's definitely an option. But yeah, those are the two drones that I ended up with. Whatever it is that you choose for your drone and your goggles, and then, you know, obviously how that interacts with your controller, double, triple check for compatibility. Make sure that your controller, your drone, and your goggles all are compatible, all will talk to each other and work with each other. So the last thing that you want is to have like an ELRS controller and a DJI digital FPV goggle system, and then you've got like a FPV drone that is like FR Sky radio protocol, and it uses an analog video transmitter. It's like you're just going to be screwed in every way. So make sure that you're paying attention to the options you're choosing. Usually when you're choosing a pre-built drone, you can choose what receiver you want to have in it and what camera system you want to have it in, what video transmission system. So just make sure that that all matches up. And if you're going to be building your own drone, that's a whole nother can of worms that I would be happy to open with you. That's what I did here. This is the first drone that I built. Let's see. This is the first drone that I built, basically not, from scratch, essentially, if you will, not in a kit. I purchased all the parts individually. I made all of my own purchasing decisions like an adult, and decided on all of these different components. Now, is it perfect? By no means. By no means is it perfect. It is hobcobbled together, and it has some issues, but generally speaking, it's really fun and great, and it's worked really well, and I know how to fix those issues, and I'm tuning it all the time and making it better, and I just have a blast with this custom built Drone, it's like it's a mix mash of all of the kind of popular drone pilots parts. You've got like Mr. Steel motors, and you've got a bot grinder frame that Umagod helped him build, I'm pretty sure, and like Umagod branded like pads on the front and top, and BQE, that's the brand of the frame, and just all sorts of fun stuff that's kind of mix mashed together, and is very much my own creation, and I quite enjoy it. So yeah, building your own, super fun, definitely an option, but just know you got a lot more to think about when you are doing that. But that, guys, is how I got into FPV drones. This is a really long video. I appreciate you guys watching it. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you got something out of it. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comment section down below, and we will see you on the next video, the next High Noon Hobby upload. But until then, I hope, it's kind of weird, my scale trails and hard lines doesn't really work when I'm talking about RC drones. I'm gonna have to figure out something else to say for that. But I hope you enjoy some RC flying, or some RC crawling, or some RC racing, or whatever type of RCing is that you do, you little RCer. And yeah, I hope you enjoy that, and we'll talk to you soon. All right, bye.